Welcome back, guys, to the Butterfly Season podcast. On today's episode, I have another dear friend of mine, Dorothy. She is agency owner of Needle's Eye Media, paid traffic agency that I've literally seen create like $500,000 months for people. Like, she and her team are literally the real deal. She's also co-founder of The Gig, which is a newsletter for agency owners, freelancers. I'm not a newsletter girl. I am subscribed to this one, and it is like the best value that you can get in a newsletter. That when I was running my agency, I think that would have been a great newsletter for me. So if that interests you, everything will be in the show notes on this podcast. I'm going to jump right into it. We talk about debt, shame, and how shame is like can be a drug and be like a thumb over you and your growth. And Dorothy got out from under this shame and debt, and how this has really like catapulted her into a beautiful transformation that will lead to a really beautiful butterfly season. And when she and I had this like really vulnerable conversation around money and mindset and debt, I knew that I wanted to have her on the podcast to talk with you guys about this, because not a lot of people are talking about it, especially not at this point in time where she is in the cocoon season and transforming and deciding of what is the life that she wants to live now, as opposed to looking at it with hindsight eyes where like, oh, I'm out from under it. I'm like all of the things. And so this is a good one. It's very vulnerable. It's very raw. And I'm just so excited for you guys to be tuning into it. When you're listening, if you hear something that you feel like resonates with somebody, share it with them. Let them know that you're thinking about them, because this is some good stuff. Dorothy, oh my gosh, I have been thinking about this day since the last time we spoke. Having you on the podcast, especially talking about such a vulnerable topic, like I am eternally grateful that you are just sharing your energy with me and also all of the listeners. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. You know, I adore you. And honestly, I think this is going to be very cathartic for me to talk about. So I'm excited.
I'm excited. And I'm still going to give a little bit of a tease and prolong any listeners, but I want to give you some backstory on mine and Dorothy's friendship. So we met in a mastermind. And in this particular mastermind, we meet 2 times a year, one at the top of the year and one at the end of the year. And at the top of the year, everyone sets what we call like a wager. And in this wager, I realize that people are either motivated by something scary or motivated by a reward. I am a scary motivated person. Like it's so sad. I'm like shame motivated. Like all of my motivators on my wager are all around shaming me for not doing the thing, which we can unpack that in, therapy at some point. But your wager was to get out of debt. I don't remember the number, and I don't know if you shared the number, but this was like 2 years ago. And I don't even remember coming back on whether or not you met that goal. But what I do remember is year 2 in the mastermind, we sat next to each other on the bus, and you were talking to me about how getting rid of this debt was a cocoon season for you, and you didn't realize that you were actually in a cocoon season and how it was holding you back. So help me fill in those blanks when you set the wager, and then what?
Yeah. So it was my wager my first year in our mastermind together, and I did not accomplish it. So I ended that year with, gosh, I don't remember exactly, but I would say roughly the same amount of debt, maybe a little bit less. But, I started, so that was 2021. I made that wager. The beginning of 2022, sitting at the start of that year, I had roughly $70,000 in, credit card debt, literally, consumer debt, which a lot of it was around my business. It was investing in, in coaching and, like the debt came from a lot of places, but I was not successful that first year in achieving that goal. But by the end of 2022, I had really by October of that year, I had paid off every single cent and was completely debt free. So it was a really interesting journey, especially reflecting on what was different between year 1 of having that goal and making almost no progress, and then year 2 of eliminating all of that debt, really effectively.
So what changed for you? What changed after, or what circumstances were there? Because life happens, right? Like Cam and I did Dave Ramsey, Get Out of Debt and all the things. And we had debt around, like, so believe it or not, in the professional athlete realm, like, it's not always money bags laying around on the floor. You have to pick up and go, and you have to move every 6 months, and moving on average costs us like 10 grand every time. And then if you're playing overseas, and there's like exchange rate, and it's like psychotic. But we built up a lot of debt around figuring things out last minute. And when we got married, we did Dave Ramsey stuff, and there was like life circumstances. We were getting married, we were doing this, we were doing that, and we couldn't, like, we chose not to, not that we couldn't, but we chose not to pay it down in a certain time frame, but eventually we did. So help me understand, like, what changed for you? What was going on between year 1 to year 2 of you actually paying down the debt?
You know, Aisha, we like to think about money as being numbers on a spreadsheet. And so when we have a money problem, that is the way that we look at it, right? But money is not about numbers on a spreadsheet. Money is about emotions and psychology. So when we have a money problem, we can't just approach it as a numbers problem. We need to identify the emotional problem beneath the surface that is causing us to behave in a certain way around money. So if you don't believe that you are worthy of having more money, if you don't believe you deserve it, or you don't believe that either you or, you know, maybe other people in your life are going to like the version of you with more money, then it doesn't matter how much you make or how much your income grows. You will find ways to push money away and to maintain the status quo that feels safe.
Wow. Okay. So let's unpack that, because I feel like you hear often, especially on Instagram and TikTok, and like depending upon what algorithm you have going on and what the internet's feeding you, I always hear people say, if you don't feel worthy enough for it, you're not going to get it. What does that tangibly look like?
So for me, like, I was getting it, right? Like so over the course of, I mean, the last 5 years or 6 years now since I started my business, my income has steadily risen. And so, you know, from the beginning of 2021 to the beginning of 2022, my income rose, but the debt didn't budge. And then what happened really was, you know, towards the end of, you know, there've been many times over the last 5 years, you know, 6 years that I had, you know, said like, all right, I'm buckling down, like, I'm going to attack this problem. I'm going to get rid of this. And it didn't happen. And so the real kind of breaking point for me was the last several months of 2021 and beginning of 2022. I kind of mapped out. I was like, all right, this is exactly how much I need to be able to pay myself from the business in order to really attack this debt and pay it down quickly. And my income did rise. I was paying myself that exact number that I had like said on the spreadsheet. You know, this is like, this is what I need to pay myself to be able to have the lifestyle that, you know, I wanted and was living, and to be able to attack the debt problem. And all of a sudden, you know, I look up after, you know, maybe 4 months of this, and I realize like it hasn't budged at all. Like, what happened? And so that was the light bulb moment for me of realizing like, okay, this isn't an income problem. This is an emotional problem and a psychological problem. And like, I am taking everything that is coming to me and I am pushing it away. I'm self-sabotaging. And that was a really powerful realization of that moment of like, okay, more income, more money, paying my, like, that is not going to solve this problem.
Yeah. Which I love that, because a lot of people say, especially in business, like sales, I forget what the tagline is. It's like sales solves all, cash solves everything. Like if you can throw cash at something, it'll solve whatever the thing is. And I feel like money just amplifies who you already are, good, bad, otherwise, right? Like emotional attachments to money, avoidance around money, whatever it is, self-sabotage around money. Like the more of it, it doesn't change. So when you realized that it was a psychological problem, then what? Like, did you go to therapy around it? Like, what did the self-work look like to even address that? Because I feel like even the thought of that feels like a very vulnerable place to be when you're like, oh, it's me.
Yeah, right. So, you know, it was a lot of reflection, a lot of time with myself. I mean, I've always worked with coaches, and that's actually a huge part of like how I, like kept myself, in this situation was I was always investing so much in my growth. And so when I would have this big ticket decision in front of me of like, okay, here's this coach that costs $5,000 a month. And like, yes, this is exactly what I need right now. And it's gonna, I was really good at talking myself into those, big ticket decisions because I did have this very like positive, like, abundance mindset of, okay, like this is the thing. And, certainly, the coaching that I did and like the programs that I joined and like the investments that I made, I did get something from all of those. But it wasn't until actually, working with a mutual friend of ours, Tracy O'Malley, that she really helped me to recognize what was going on at a deeper level. And this is different for everyone, right? So I can only speak from my own experience. And I also don't want to speak, as if this is over. Right? Like I'm still working on all of these things. Like I'm still in this, but I think for me, it was really a self-worth issue of feeling like I didn't deserve real success or like I didn't deserve wealth. And, it's interesting to me, my sister, who's, my best friend, she's not an entrepreneur, but she's so supportive of me, and she has called me out so many times of like, I'll make comments about myself of saying, that, oh, I was so lazy this, today, or I was like, I'll talk about myself of, saying that I was lazy or saying that I, didn't do what I, as much as I want to do or whatever. And she called me out one day of like, you always say that you're lazy. You're the least lazy person I know. Like you work your ass off. Yeah. And she's right. I do. I mean, I work, I work so hard, and I have worked so hard to build my business, but I talk down to myself, and I have a tendency to attribute all of my success to other people. Right. So, I'm so fortunate to have surrounded myself with incredible people in my business. And, I'm so quick to say, oh, like our $1 million revenue year, like our wins in the business, like, oh, well, that's John, that's Jim, that's, these people on my team. But I don't give myself any credit of, I'm the person who created this business. I'm the person who brought those people together. Right. And so, I just had this really deep down belief that I didn't deserve what I had created.
And so do you think that there is something to be reconciled? Because this is what I'm hearing, and not from you, but I'm tying it into what I hear online, what I like Abraham Hicks. I've been like deep in the rabbit hole of Abraham Hicks, especially around worth and what you want and money and being in an energetic state of receiving. And so when you're talking down to yourself and feeling like you need stuff instead of just like wanting it, like need is coming from lack, right? Where want and desire maybe is coming from like, I'm already content, but I would love more. That's a state of receiving, whereas need is a state of like blocking off. And so when you tell me something like I've been negatively talking down to myself, my self-worth wasn't there around money and all of the things. I'm like, but Dorothy, your company has been so extremely successful. So like, even though it's feeling like there's mixed energy, right? Like around receiving and then not receiving or lack and abundance, I'm like, how do you make sense of a company doing so well? Yeah. And you bringing in the money into your paycheck, like there's a discrepancy there that I'm not quite understanding.
I would say a few things. So first of all, I've been great at receiving. So I love Abraham Hicks. I'm such an Abraham Hicks junkie. Yes. And, I have manifested, I can look back at, my journaling or, over the last few years of, when I'd be journaling about like, gosh, what it's going to feel like when I have my first $10,000 month, my first $20,000 month, my first $50,000 month, revenue in the business. Yeah. And at each stage of that, I thought that more revenue, more sales, like growing my business was going to solve my money issues. And so as I would hit these milestones, it was like I had to hit all of these milestones. Like, I remember like the first month that my business did $100,000 in revenue. Like I remember thinking back, a while ago of like, man, like when I'm there, oh my gosh, like it's all going to be like gravy, there's like, I'm going to have no problems. Right. And so as you like hit those milestones and you realize that, the problems are still there, it forces you to look at things from a different lens. And so one thing I would say is that being in masterminds in the way that we are, it's shown me how normal this stuff is.
Oh my gosh, like, so normal.
Like you look at other people's businesses that are, are successful, and, you think, gosh, like they have it all together. And when you actually like, build these relationships, you realize like, for some, it's not the same issue for everyone, but there's so many people who I, looked at as like, I put them on these pedestals, and then I get to know them and I realize like, oh man, like they're going through some real shit. Like they're, whether it be money related or, in their businesses, or like, they were, I thought they were, on top of the world and they were 30 days from closing the doors. Like you just never know what's really going on with some behind the scenes.
Right.
And also like, I think for me, there was so much shame tied, like you mentioned, shame. Mm-hmm. Shame is my drug, like 100%. And there was so much shame for me around the idea that, I have a paid traffic agency. We run ads for, we manage our clients' ad accounts. We help them to, make more sales and make more money.
Lot of money. Yes.
Exactly.
Like shameless plug. Dorothy's agency is like low key a printing money machine.
Well, so you can understand then the dichotomy, like just the tension that existed and the shame that I would put on myself of like, here I am, like I have this business that is all about helping people make more money. And here I am with this dark, dirty money secret, like money shame, like, and so I think the story, like, I think it's so important to think about like, what story are you telling yourself?
Yeah.
And for me, I had this self-worth issue of I didn't believe I was worthy of success. I didn't believe I deserved success. And so the debt was a way that I could justify those, feelings of limited worth, right? So yes, I have this successful business over here, and like that's who we do amazing things for our clients, and like, I have this amazing team, and and yeah, that's successful, right? Oh, but if you really knew, I have this debt, I have this, dirty secret over here that is the justification to myself for why all of that success isn't real, doesn't actually say anything about me.
Okay, so shame. This is good, right? Like, okay, so now my question to you is the shame, because I feel like usually whenever there's an issue, it's like the answer is like usually 3 questions beneath the surface, right? It's like, oh, I'm frustrated. Oh, because I'm angry. Oh, because I had a bad day. Oh, because like, and then it gets down to I'm self-sabotaging, so I just woke up in a bad mood because I'm not deserving of success, right? So was shame manifesting itself in avoidance around paying down the debt? Like, I know it's shame, right? But how was it manifesting itself? It feels like maybe avoidance because the money was hitting the account, but we weren't allocating the money towards the debt. Like what was?
Yeah, I don't think it was avoidance, because it was like I was constantly paying it down, but then building it back up. I was constantly making these, right. So, I was always talking myself into these big ticket, expenses or decisions, like my now husband and I, we invested $30,000 into this, real estate program that like we had no business. Like I didn't have the money for that. Like, what was I, and I was so good at like talking myself into these things and saying like, oh yeah, this is perfect. Yeah, I think it was self-sabotage for me.
So what's the reason of these big ticket things is like, this is the thing that'll make me successful, even though you're already successful, like learning this, you know what I mean? Like what was the reasoning behind it to justify, like, I guess at its root, do you know?
It's a hard question to answer, but I think that I was chasing this feeling of success, of worth, of, acceptance of myself. And because I had this very successful business where everyone was telling me that I was successful, it looked successful, and it is successful, right?
Yes, yes.
But I didn't feel successful. And so I think what it was for me was I was just chasing this feeling. And even though I had this incredible business that, should give me that feeling, it wasn't there. So I felt like I needed to go out and find it in other things. And so it was really this thing of, I was not addressing what was really going on, which was, an emotional problem. It wasn't a business problem or a money problem, or, it was an emotional thing.
So how did you begin to, now that we've identified the issue, we've seen how it was manifesting itself, what did integration look like? What did it look like for you to build back up your self-worth?
Yeah. So, I think I would be remiss to only talk about that piece without talking about the actual practical piece of what I did as well, because both sides have to be there. Right. Yeah. So, the first thing I did, after this stretch of time where I was paying myself that magic number where I was like, this is going to make the debt go away. And it wasn't. Yeah. I was like, okay, I need help. Right. So I'll start on the practical side. I hired a financial coach. And his name's Phil McGilvray. Shout out to Phil. And,
is this different than a financial advisor? And if so, how?
Yes. So definitely different. A financial advisor is, giving you, guiding you on kind of where to invest and, what to do with your money. My work with Phil, with this financial coach, it was around accountability, and it was around, creating a system for, essentially cash flow management, right? Again, like I mentioned, I was so good at talking myself into these purchase decisions, but talking myself into them and talking Phil into them are very different things, right? So, even just knowing that, I was going to have to get on a call with this person, every month and justify these decisions that I had made and explain them to someone else, that alone made a dramatic change in my behavior.
Wow.
Because all of a sudden it wasn't some, dirty little secret that I could just keep to myself and, beat myself with a shame stick. Someone else was going to see it. And so I think accountability is really powerful. So on a practical side, he helped me to implement, a system for, how cash flowed through my business and through my personal life, how I was, really tracking everything, understanding, my profitability and optimizing for that, not optimizing for revenue, but optimizing for profit. And then that accountability of knowing that any decisions that I did make of things I want to spend money on, I was going to have to justify to someone else. So that on the practical side was massive. And then on the emotional side, I mentioned to you, my work with Tracy O'Malley. So I started working with her at the beginning of 2022, and, she coaches from the framework of the Enneagram, and I'm an Enneagram 2, which is the helper. And so, I'm inherently motivated by wanting to be loved, liked, appreciated. And so, I was really, kind of on this path with Tracy of understanding my motivations, why I do things, which is often in this kind of subconscious, give to get type of thing, because, I want that validation, I want, to be seen and, all of these different things. It was really about kind of learning more about myself and, learning kind of what drives me and why I do the things that I do. And as I kind of gained these new levels of self-awareness, it helped me to, really kind of start to identify these issues of worth. I was looking for my worth in other people. I was looking for my worth in what does Aisha think of me? What does, do these people in the mastermind, do they like me? Am I and it was never about do I like me? What do I think of Dorothy?
Yeah. Wow. I can resonate with that so much around accolades, and my how I received love when I was a child was performance-based, great grades, performing well in things. And so it inherently made me seek that out. And it's so interesting because I feel like some of our biggest I don't know, pain points around how we receive love, like inherently as a child or whatever it is, becomes our like superpower in some ways until you realize that this is actually like a coping mechanism. So it's like accolade driven for me, which makes sense of why I'm like high achiever and all the things, because it's all around love.
Yeah. I realized I had done a lot of self-work, a lot of, kind of thinking about my childhood and traumas and all of the things. And what was interesting was, I had some kind of obviously identifiable, shit from growing up. But, one thing that I had never really connected the dots on before was, I have my mother, take my mother, for example. I have the most loving, incredible, wonderful mother in the world. She is an angel on earth. And she really, showered me with so much praise and validation, and love as a child. And what's so interesting was one of the epiphanies I had was, now as an adult, when I don't get that level of validation and praise from other people, I fall apart, and I think that there's a problem with me. So, learning how to give that validation to myself and to, look at my worth as being inherent rather than, being something that other people could give to me, external. Yeah. Yeah. So, I know this is vague, kind of what I'm giving people in terms of what I did, but that's because it's so unique. It's so different for every person.
It is. Yeah. It is. And there's a through line. It is unique and there's a through line. And so for me, just to piece that puzzle together and use the same, bones of yours and put my like fat on those bones, is that from a accolade driven person who as a child would receive love based on performance, my worth would be, I would find something that you and I can agree on is the thing that deserves praise and accolades, and I would go for that thing. So like class president, cheer captain, Forbes 30 under 30. I had such a deep desire and I would do all of those things, but because I knew that that was like a universal accolade that everybody can agree on is the best thing in the room. So if I can get that thing, then I know now that everyone thinks I'm the best person in the room. It's like, and it's all external. It's not internal. And I don't know if you felt this way, but when I finally realized that there was one point in time where I felt like in my cocoon season, that self-worth and confidence were the same. So someone was like, oh, you have a self-worth problem. And I'm like, I am very confident. And they're like, no, babe, not the same. Right? And so you can be a highly confident person, but have a really low sense of self-worth. And I'm curious if this was true for you, but when I realized like how low and how deep and painful, like no longer having an external universal thing that people can think of me and I can use that to determine or feel safe, whatever, and feel worthy. It was a really hard point in time. I felt literally worthless before I could start to slowly work with myself to build up my internal worth. What was that process like for you when you realized?
That resonates with me so deeply, like the confidence versus self-worth piece, and another mutual friend of ours, said something to me very powerful, at one of these mastermind events, because, we did these hot seats, right? And I got up for my hot seat and I started talking about money mindset. And, within 60 seconds, I was just hysterically sobbing up there in this chair, like to all of these people. And, and someone said to me afterwards, you're so confident. You're so you are so sure of yourself as far as what you do, my business, my knowledge, my ability to help someone with their, scaling their business with paid traffic. But I didn't know who I was outside of that. I had no confidence in myself as a person separate from what I do for work and what I do in my business. And I thought those were the same. Like I thought, gosh, I'm so confident. Like and so realizing that when I was asked the question of, who is Dorothy? Who are you? The answers that I gave were exclusively about what I do and what I am to other people. And so, it was a very painful realization, but also a really beautiful realization of like, gosh, well, if I don't know who I am outside of what I do for other people and like what I do in, my work, then I get to decide. I get to create that. I get to start right now and make that choice of who do I want to be? Who am I? And who do I want to be in this world? And so I think that's a beautiful opportunity.
I just got the chills thinking about that, because as we just talk about your story and then obviously the podcast, the Butterfly Season podcast, like my ethos around this podcast is to highlight the beauty and the transformation, like this part, this like cusp of the story that we're just getting into. It's like this realization. And once you realize, like for me, like I just felt so low, like literally I felt like there was this tall mountain in front of me. And in order for me to get on that tall mountain, like, gosh, it's millions of steps. Like the pile of shit that was my own felt so big to even deal with that it felt like unfathomable to get around it. And like Abraham Hicks is like, get ready to get ready to get ready to get ready. And then you get the thing and all whatever. Right. So like, and we'll go down that rabbit hole later, but it's just like small steps at a time, like building the relationship with yourself, building the relationship with yourself, building the relationship. And then eventually you turn around and you're like, wow, I've climbed a lot of this mountain. Like the top doesn't seem so far away. Build the relationship, build the relationship, build the relationship. And so at this point in time of your butterfly season, like we're in the cocoon phase where like the caterpillar, I guess it's called like butterfly soup. Like it just like turns into like water or something. I don't know. It's like a milkshake of some sort and then like reforms into a butterfly. So you're in your milkshake season. How did you decide like, who is Dorothy? Who do I want to be? Like, and what was that process like to uncover that? For me, I was having anxiety dreams that I was going to do something to self-sabotage my life. And like my dreams, Dorothy, were like, I killed my friend's brother with spaghetti, like put it on his face and he died. Like it's so outlandish, but it was because the slate is so clean. I can create whatever from here. And that's a little bit scary. So what was that like for you?
It's such a great question. I think that's the season I'm in right now. I think this is a work in progress, but we're sitting here, we're recording this in May of 2023. It was October of last year that, I eliminated the last remnants of the debt. And so, I think where I'm at right now is in really being intentional about the self-work. So some specific steps I took, was when I, realized when our mutual friend Lizzie, kind of gave me this epiphany of like, I'm so confident in business, but I don't know who I am, outside of that. I actually sent questions to some of the closest people in my life. So, to my sister, to friends that I've had since I was a child, to Tracy, and asked, okay, who do you see me as? And then if I were to lose my job, my accolades, all of these kind of things that I do, what would I still have to offer the world? And so, I sent these questions out to, probably 6 people closest to me. And the answers I got back were, so beautiful and kind of gave me this starting point of, okay, like these are the people that know me the best of anyone in the world. Like, who do they see, when they think about me? And, they used words that I, had never thought to ascribe to myself. Words like brave, like that was one that came up that I was like, gosh, I never thought to describe myself as brave, and so I used that as a starting point. And then I really, journaled very intentionally around, what I want to be and who I want to be. And, then kind of started to try those things on for size, like, all right, how does this feel? Right. Does this feel aligned? And, I think there's also this, we mentioned the self-talk, right? So, my habit of constantly throwing my accolades, onto other people and, just kind of rejecting my own part that I have in, creating what I've created in my business, so really being intentional about catching myself in those moments where I'm talking down to myself or, I'm, pushing away compliments or, rejecting compliments or refusing to take any credit, catching myself in those moments and really deliberately reframing the story. And so, it is this daily work in progress. But, I have realized that this fear that I had, because I had a big fear when I paid off the debt, my fear was, what if it comes right back? What if I do this again? What if I get myself back in that place? And it's been really freeing to recognize that even though I'd had this cycle before of just going, the debt just rising and then falling a little and rising and falling a little, that what's different about now is that I'm actually addressing the core, not just the surface. And so I know I'm not going to get myself back in that situation because for the first time ever, I am, really doing the work.
Yeah. And so when you mentioned that you would, with the negative self-talk, you would catch yourself and then reform that story, can you give us a practical example of what that looked like?
Yeah. So for me, all of the, my negative self-talk, it's guilt and it's shame and it's blame, right? So when something happens in, an interpersonal interaction or, I feel like I, kind of put my foot in my mouth or I said something that was maybe, taken the wrong way, I am very quick to just pile on and, and really just beat myself up for it. And so I actually said something in one of those hot seats at the mastermind event that we were at, where, I was trying to give someone, support and advice. And, the way that I worded this, this sentiment that I wanted to get across, it was fine in the moment. But then as I was like sitting in my hotel room, ruminating that night on my day, I got really in my head that maybe it was taken the wrong way. And then maybe I had accidentally said something that was hurtful. And I went to this place of blame and shame, and they must be mad at me. They're probably thinking about this, they're probably, they hate me now. And I went through this exercise of thinking about, okay, if this was a friend, if Aisha, if you were telling me about this exact same interaction of what you said and, what the situation was, what would I say to you? And if this was anyone else in my life telling me about this exact same scenario, I would have, said, oh my gosh, like, absolutely not. Like that was, not only was it, almost certainly not taken in this way that I had concocted, but even if it was, they know my heart, they know how much I love them. They know like the place I'm coming from. So, of course they're going to give me the benefit of the doubt because they know me. And so it was this kind of process of reasoning myself through like, all right, if someone else was describing this exact same thing to me, what would I tell them? And giving myself that same benefit of the doubt that I would give to anyone else or that anyone in that situation would certainly give.
Yeah. The real-time ones are hard. And I can relate so much to the spiral. So when I finally realized my self-worth and how it was just so tied to performance, I just started doing these dance classes, and I've been dancing like all of my life in college and all of the things. And I was new, and it's choreographed. So like, if you're a returning person, you already know the moves. But if you're new, you don't. And with sports specifically, my mom was a single mom. And so she couldn't be at all of the things. And when it came to cheer, the cheer moms are a lot like dance moms. Like it's just chaotic, right? And my mom like never wanted any part of it. And so she wouldn't come to the stuff because if you came, you had to be around like all that was a toxic environment around these like moms. And so in order for what I realized and had an epiphany around, in order for me to get love from my mom, I had to be the best person on the team, because then the parents, whenever they saw my mom, would tell my mom how good I was. And then I would get the praise and the accolades from that. And so a real-time example for me, I started this dance class. I've been doing it now since December. I go every Monday. And there was one girl who was like so great, performing really, really well. And it was like maybe my third week going. And I'm telling you, these are the same routines every time. It's like a dance fitness class. Like it's the same song. Like eventually you'll catch on and know it. I wanted to cry. I wanted to leave. I was so frustrated because anytime I get into a place, even if I'm at the gym, even if I'm in yoga, like I will spot out the best person and just be competing with them the whole time, not even running my own race. I'm just so focused on the other person. And now I'm like irritated with them and how they showed up. And that was like my spiral, right? Like me just going down this rabbit hole. And so now I've gone to a point where, one, I've gotten better, like generally in the classes that I've taken after having taken them for so long. But two, I'm like, what is this telling me? Like how good they are. Like they're showing me like how great I can be. Like it's not really about competing. When one person's winning, that doesn't mean the other person's losing. It's just an opportunity to also like rise to the occasion. And so I feel you on those real-time realizations, because the spiral is like, holy shit, like you really can get really low and down on yourself and like want to give up. But that reframing and retelling the story, like you said, is like that practice is always going to be a practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it gets easier each time.
Yeah. And we should be at least as nice to ourselves as we would be to a friend, right? I mean, don't we owe ourselves that? So,
right.
Yeah.
It's so true. So I have one final question for you. You mentioned, I asked you like, what are you wanting to be? Like, this is your like milkshake butterfly season era, right? Like maybe you're not quite in the butterfly season, but we're in the messy, beautiful middle where you get to choose what is the next version of you. Who is Dorothy right now?
I love that question. Dorothy is compassionate, is brave, is generous, is open-hearted and kind. I think for me in kind of rewriting this story, you said something earlier about, money is an amplifier. Money makes you more of who you are. It doesn't make you good or bad. One of the things that came up for me after I had paid off all of the debt was that, okay, well, if now I, am past that story and in a new story, I worried that I was going to become someone that people didn't like, that I was going to become, greedy or selfish or, rude or, or whatever, materialistic, all of these things. And what I have realized is that if you're a good person, money is going to allow you to do good on an even greater scale. If you're a generous person, if you're a loving person, if you're a person who wants to serve, money is just that amplifier, right? And so, I think for me, I'm in this place now of, I'm in this new chapter. The debt chapter is behind me. And so now I get to take the values that I have, as a person, and I get to allow money to be that amplifier to let me spread more light and love and, do good things, for my family, for other people, for myself. And, that is really who I'm excited to be in this next chapter.
That's so beautiful. And you're funny and you're kind and you are like literally such a beautiful onion. And I say that because I feel like there's so many layers of you. And the more we build our relationship, like the closer to the core of the onion I get, I'm like, you are like literally the dopest person I have ever met. And it's like so unexpectedly like, wow, I never thought you would be like open to talking about that. Or like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, I just love our relationship. I love like how we've gotten deep on like the craziest topics of the craziest things that are probably not podcast appropriate, but I love it. And I love you. And I'm so thankful that you're here with me today and that you were talking about something so vulnerable that I know is going to resonate with so many people. It resonated with me, and your light is so bright. And I'm so excited for us to look back at this episode and look at this like beautiful mess. It's not even messy, but this beautiful transition to see like, what does like butterfly season look like for Dorothy? It's going to be insane.
That means the world to me. I love you so much. Thank you.
I love you too.